And the point is, marriage and manhood and womanhood does not make sense without God. You can say a lot of good things, but when you take God out of the equation, you get a lot of mess, you get a lot of drama. Because when God is in the equation, you have men and husbands who are willing to die for their wives because of the love they have for them, the respect they have for them, because they're following Christ. And then you naturally have women who want to respect their husbands because of the love like Christ that they are getting. And that's the kind of relationship and picture that God in his perfect will wanted the world to see, because he wanted the world to see his relationship with us. And that is exemplified in a marriage relationship.
Women are currently being erased in culture, and I want to amplify their voices and share their stories. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to This is a Woman podcast. And let me just tell you, we have such a good episode for you guys today. And truly, you're going to want to listen all the way through till the end. Our guest just gives some phenomenal mic drop advice at the end. And so you're going to want to stick through till that part. But we dive into what sexual exploitation is, but also abortion and the sexual exploitation connection. And we dive into how Planned Parenthood kind of chooses to ignore patients and victims that are brought into them that are being sexually exploited. We talk about how this is affecting the everyday life, the pornography industry, and the harms of that. We even dive a little bit into, if you're familiar with the documentary Quiet on Set that was just released a couple months ago about the Nickelodeon stars from the 90s and 2000s and the sexual abuse and trauma that they went through. So we hit so many topics. It is such a powerful conversation with Patrina Mosley. That is the guest for today. And let me just read y'all her bio because she is amazing. She is killing it. She is just absolutely doing so much to stand up for pro-woman policies, pro-family policies. And so Patrina is a speaker, author, and advocate for child protection and women's dignity issues, which includes the right to life and combating sexual exploitation. Her commentary has been featured in the New York Times, National Review, Washington Examiner, The Hill, the Washington Times, The Federalist, and more, including over 90 published issue briefs, reports, articles. Patrina's sought-after expertise has placed her before multiple state legislatures, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, and serving as an appointed human rights advisor in the United States Agency for International Development. She has had the privilege of serving in various leadership roles at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, Concern One for America, and at the Family Research Council. Her career and passion have been focused on advocating for policies that are both pro-woman and pro-family, domestically and internationally. Patrina is a National Advisory Board member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network, an advisory board member of Human Coalition Action, and is a contributing author to Choose Life, answering key claims of abortion defenders with compassion. Patrina is a graduate of Liberty University with a Bachelor of Science in Religion and a Master of Arts in Public Policy. And so she is amazing. I'm so excited for you guys to hear this episode. And so with that, let's dive right into it. Well, Patrina Mosley, welcome to This is a Woman podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, we are so happy to have you here. All the listeners just heard all about what you're doing and the amazing work you're doing just across the nation. Something that I love is really the pro-woman, pro-family policies you're working on. A lot of people don't realize you can be pro-woman and pro-family because of the lies that have just been spread across culture, which stems from a lot of different things. One of the main things it stems from is sexual exploitation, but we miss that there's a connection between abortion and sexual exploitation. So can we just kind of unravel what that even means? A lot of people don't realize there's sexual exploitation. When they think of that, they think of like third world countries, sex trafficking. They are not thinking here in America daily. We are seeing that happen. So could we unravel that a bit?
Yeah, so first of all, when we talk about sexual exploitation, it's kind of a catch all phrase for sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape, incest, trafficking, prostitution, any type of commercial sexual activity. So it's kind of wrapped up in this nice little term called sexual exploitation, because we know whether it's a person who is knowingly a victim to the spectrum of where they say that they're willing, but they're getting some type of exchange of financial resources, housing compensation, something in exchange for their body, though they say they're willing, it is exploitation. It is coercion by default because of the nature of the exchange. Because they wouldn't be sleeping with you if you weren't paying. So that's what we mean by sexual exploitation. And really, one of the groundbreaking studies that came out a few years ago was from the Beasley Institute of the University of Chicago that talked about health disparities amongst those who were being sexually exploited. And what was interesting, what they found was that 30% of those surveyed in the study went to Planned Parenthood. And amongst them, they had 166 abortions. 166. So, though the study was not focused on abortion, it was certainly a left leaning, secular focused study. It just so happened to pick up a huge piece of truth. And so, when I came across that study in my time of doing pro life policy, I was so burdened to further investigate this connection, because really what it comes down to, like I just explained, all those different sectors of sexual exploitation is is directly connected to abortion, because the more sexually promiscuous we become as a culture, the more abortion is an option on the table. And I spent a time, maybe about a year or so, in a pregnancy center where I saw in real time, live, right before my eyes, the study that these are not just your run of the mill women who are, oops, Britney Spears, I did it again, I got pregnant. Like, no, these are people who are often coming out of very traumatic situations, lifetime movie scenarios, and it's not cut and dry. So, what I wanted to focus on was not just how do we save a life, which is very, very important, but how do we rescue the carrier of that life before they even get into this situation. So that's how I begin my focus and my study. And this is really how being pro women is pro family.
That's really powerful to hear the stat you gave about the amount of pregnancy, the amount of abortions there were. And I think that's something that is a little overlooked. It's not talked about. People don't realize it's happening, is the fact that when we have this sexual exploitation, when we have this sex trafficking industry that is growing and rampant and very alive here in the United States, it is leading to women are getting pregnant through that. And what we see in those situations, are we kind of seeing, oh, women get pregnant and then they just get set free and they're out of the sex trafficking because the person doesn't want to use them anymore? Do they get pregnant and do they get sent and forced into an abortion? What's the reality of what is happening in those situations?
Yeah, I love that you call it the sex industry, because that's what it is. And really what we see is the sex industry and the abortion industry being symbiotically linked. And the way that we know that is because, number one, the sex industry is naturally sexually risky. Okay, so you do have females who are seeing 5 to 10 to 20 clients a day. So again, sexually risky. On top of rape, sexual assault, incest that happens, and I'm going to touch a little bit more on that later. But all these instances are connected to abortion, are connected to abuse. So when we see that side of the industry, we see Planned Parenthood happy to provide the abortion, because the abuser is happy to come in there and say, can you take care of this problem for me? Or the victim herself is thinking, I just don't want to have to deal with this pregnancy or this issue because it reminds me of, X trauma, which we know from studies, abortion only compounds the trauma of sexual assault and victimization. So It doesn't help. It's not a quick fix. It doesn't take away your problem, but really it's two businesses. And there was another great study. So I mean, I love study, I love research so that people can see like it's not just right wing pro lifers out there saying stuff. Like no, this has been researched, documented, and backed up by eyewitness testimonies and accounts. And in this research done by Live Action, actually, which I know you all are great partners with in this work, did an excellent study a couple of years ago that surveyed Planned Parenthoods at multiple cities. I think it was about 5 to 8 cities, major cities, where they sent someone in undercover to be a minor who claimed to have been sexually exploited and be there with her pimp slash trafficker. And what did the Planned Parenthood workers do in each and every case? Assist the abuser. They welcomed the victim in, saying, "Oh, that's okay. We'll take care of your problem. Just make sure you fill out the paperwork in this such fashion so that we're legally covered and we're not blowing the whistle on your abuse and your pimp and your abuser skates off free. And then we'll take care of this child for you." On top of that, one manager at a Planned Parenthood is quoted saying to a minor who is being pimped out, which is technically trafficking if she's under 18, saying, "Work your client's waist up until you heal from the abortion." They didn't do anything about her abuse. They didn't question why this child was being sold for sex to men. They got her the abortion, sent her out the door with her abuser, didn't say a word, no report, no anything. That was a chance for her to be rescued, for her to be heard, for her to be seen. But they got their money and sold them a lie of a quick fix. And the abuser's sitting right there. So we know this is happening. So you have Planned Parenthood, who is caught again on videotape saying, "We're selling off baby body parts so we can get Lamborghinis. We can get this kickback. We can get that deal. As long as we make sure we sell the abortion while our other services decrease, even at the cost of victims who are being exploited before our very eyes, we'll work symbiotically with the abuser to keep the payroll going on abortion." And so, I mean, it definitely proves over and over again this is not a place that's pro women. They will look you dead in the eye while you're abused and send you right out the door with no help.
This is something, this is something I'm aware of, that these things are happening, and it's still just hearing you talk about it. It like brings chills to my body, genuinely like makes me nauseous, because that is the reality, that we have this huge organization across the United States, Planned Parenthood, that is symbiotically like helping out the sex industry. Because
Yeah.
like you said, you spent a year or so at a pregnancy center, and I just think if you are in a situation where a woman walks in and all of a sudden you start realizing, she's looking to be underage, she's pregnant, who is this random man that dropped her off or is here, who's filling out the paperwork? This is not adding up. And yet, Planned Parenthood's thinking the same thing, but for them, they're thinking, "Oh yeah, this makes sense. This is her pimp. This is her trafficker. This is the situation." But if they cut off that pipeline,
Yes.
their money is now out the door. And so it really shows that they are willing to sacrifice the safety of women, of these victims, in order to, like you said, get their Lamborghinis, to get their money, to keep those checks coming. I mean, that all aside, you push that aside and you look at Planned Parenthood, how can anyone say they are pro women?
I mean, you can't. I mean, the evidence is right there in our faces. And if this is how they're treating victims of abuse, how much more are they going to be treating regular women who come through the door, who are placing their trust in these quote unquote doctors' hands for their health care? I doubt any woman should be doing that if this is how they're treating victims of abuse. So one other thing to point out in the study that surveyed prostitutes, individuals who are being prostituted, they said that they would go to Planned Parenthood for their health needs, and I quote, "because they didn't ask questions." They did not ask questions. They were not going to pry into the affairs of their abuse. So their abuser, the trafficker, and their pimp, they have a partnership with Planned Parenthood. They will go there knowing that they won't ask questions. They will show us how to fill out the paperwork so that we can legally skirt the law, and no one has to be the wiser. And the reason why this is such a symbiotic relationship is that, once again, sexual exploitation and trafficking and prostitution, it is naturally sexually risky, and it is naturally profitable. Okay, so number one, we have the latest stat is saying that 91% of men are viewing and consuming pornography, which we know from research enables the sex trafficking industry. So they don't know that we each click that that person behind the screen is willing or not. They don't know that person could be trafficked. Number two, it spurs them on to want to buy sex. So it inspires them to act out what they're seeing. So pornography enables sex trafficking slash prostitution, and there's a legal distinction there that we can get into. But it's all trafficking in my mind, okay? In my opinion, folks, it's all trafficking. It's all commercial sex, okay? So, so you have that, and so why is this business so lucrative? Okay, they're making $50,000 to $100,000 a week in the sex industry. That's per individual. Individual, okay. So you have that, and you have Planned Parenthood, who was in the excess of 98 point. I think it was in 2019. It was like 98 million in excess funds. I mean, these are two profitable industries that are symbiotically linked, profiting off of the degradation of women. So the link can't be any clearer than that. I really do hope people can see that this is not a place that's pro women. They claim to be pro women, but what they are is pro money. That's what they are.
Absolutely. And I want to dive more into this pornography aspect. But before we do, there might be some girls, some moms listening to this podcast right now, and they're thinking, okay, you're telling me about all this horrible stuff Planned Parenthood is doing and how they are pro money, truly anti woman. But what happens if I do need to go get that STD test, or if I do need to have these different things done? Where can I go? A lot of people, they know where to go get an abortion or free things like that. They know to go to Planned Parenthood. But if you want to go somewhere to get, again, that free STD testing, maybe that free pregnancy test, that free ultrasound, women don't know where to go. So they still find themselves going to Planned Parenthood in these situations. You touched on the pregnancy center you were at for a year. For people listening, and again, I'm based in California. We have about 170 pregnancy centers in the state of California. But could you dive into maybe what it is that a pregnancy center does so that women know they can go receive help there when they need?
Yes, so women do have options. Okay, Planned Parenthood claims to offer you an escape hatch of abortion, a quick fix of abortion, but we know it's not a quick fix. There are long term physical and emotional damages, but they're happy to take your money and send you out the door. But in case that's not your issue, they say, well, come to us for STD and pregnancy testing. Okay, well, they're going to charge you because they're business, and they're making money off of your sexual promiscuity. And then they actually build curriculum to go into your schools to teach you how to be more promiscuous instead of more safe, so they can get your business. Now, the opposite side of that is our pregnancy resource centers. They are not for profit. They are, majority of them in the country are volunteer based. They are nonprofit. They are charities, and they are ministry funded. Okay, and you can go there in your local area and find one, and they will provide you free pregnancy testing, free STD testing, and other types of sexual testing that you can get for free. And they will actually sit with you and educate you on your options moving forward, and on your options on living a sexually safer life. So they are there for you, and they're not going to charge you. And another resource is also your local state department, your local state health department, I should say. You can also get free pregnancy testing and STD testing there as well. But they're not Planned Parenthood's not going to tell you that because they want your money. So you have really two great options, and really the best is your local pregnancy resource center, because they're going to care for more than your body. They're going to care for your soul, your spirit, and your mind. And they're going to be there to walk you through maybe some questions you've been afraid to ask some people. Maybe you want to open up to someone that is not in your inner circle, but someone who can objectively see your situation from the outside and ask you some tough questions and maybe let you vent and get some stuff out about your relationship. So it is really a ministry field place that is truly there to serve women and to serve women only, not the dollar.
Amazing. So, yes, women, you do have not just other options, but better, real options. So, ditch Planned Parenthood. Maybe that's the new trend we'll start seeing. We're seeing girls start to ditch all these other things. So, let's ditch Planned Parenthood while we're at it. But
Yes.
you touched on pornography. So, sexual exploitation, again, I think a lot of people think of that as a third world country human trafficking situation, not what's happening here. We've dove into kind of what we're seeing happen through Planned Parenthood and sex trafficking together. People don't necessarily think pornography when they think sexual exploitation.
Yeah.
People, I think, something that through my job, California Family Council, that we've been working on in the state of California is a bill this year. I think it's now passed in 17 states, but it's just an age verification for online pornography so that minors can't access that. And I've even realized through the conversations I've been having with that is people do not realize how many of just the common everyday people are watching porn on a day-to-day basis. We've worked with an organization in California called Magdalene Hope, and the main guy in charge, he has shared that he was introduced to porn at a very young age, and eventually that wasn't enough for him. And this is kind of what you touched on. Eventually he became a buyer of women because watching porn wasn't enough. But I would love to dive into maybe the connections between that, how pornography does truly increase the sex trafficking industry, or just the harms pornography has to people, even if it doesn't lead to them sex trafficking.
Yeah, so first I will hit your question about sex trafficking and how people think it's just a third world issue. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. And in the United States, Florida and California actually are the two top states for the most trafficking incidents in this country. Now, trafficking does happen globally, but guess what? The US is the number one enabler of global trafficking. And that was a stat from the US State Department about 4 years ago. So who knows what it is now? But we know about Jeffrey Epstein, don't we? And what he was doing and how he was earning his money. So that, this isn't too far fetched. As they say, truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. That's the case here. And what is so heartbreaking about trafficking is that it could be right in front of your face. It could be happening in plain sight. One example of a story that I read in an article was of a woman who was trafficked while she was a girl at 13 years of age. She was trafficked from actually 6 to 13 of age. And how she was trafficked was her dad trafficked her. And actually, the stats are that 50% of trafficking victims are being trafficked and exploited by someone they know, by someone in their family, which is so heartbreaking. And so her dad will be the one pimping her out to other men. And how he would do this in plain sight would be he would take her to Target, take her to the bathroom as if he's, taking his kid to the bathroom. And another guy will come in acting like he's looking for his daughter and molest her there in the stall.
Mm-hmm.
And it was men after men after men. And this is all in a supermarket in plain sight. So sometimes you just don't know. And that's why it can seem like this is a third world issue. This is an issue that doesn't touch us, but it is in plain sight. It is in neighborhoods. It could be across the street. You just don't know. So I just want to touch on that real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But how pornography is connected, interesting enough, Polaris, which is a great anti-sex trafficking organization that provides a hotline for anyone that may see indications of trafficking. They can call this hotline and they will dispatch help and start an investigation. And I've actually contacted this hotline. They are very thorough, very good, as far as I know. Okay, so but they put out reports every year. And what was surprising was that the two top places of the most trafficking happening here in the U.S. is number one, illicit massage parlors, and number two, pornography. Pornography. That means there are people on pornography sites that are being viewed, and that person on the other side of the screen does not know that person is being forced to perform whatever they're doing. And the reason why this is the case is that, again, let's go back to the fact that exploiting women is all about money. Okay? The sex industry is about money. And this another quote from a pimp said, I can make more off of a woman than I can drugs, because drugs, you use it and it's gone. A woman I can reuse over and over and over again, which means, number one, it's important for her to get that abortion so I can put her back on the street. And number two, I can double my profits off of the sex that she is giving to a John by filming it. So I get paid, I get a compensation off the act. And number two, I get a compensation if I film it and distribute it on porn sites, and it gets monetized and I get a cut. This is how pornography is directly connected to sex trafficking. That's why with each click, women, men, whoever, you do not know if that person on the other side of the screen is willing or not. And I can tell you this right now, most likely they are living their worst nightmare and they don't even know they're being filmed. How do I know that? Because, of all people, New York Times did a door busting investigation on the amount of child sexual abuse material that was being reported to law enforcement. It was being reported at such a high extent that law enforcement has been overwhelmed. Okay, at that point it was 2019. They had over 18.9 million reports of child sexual abuse material. Now, what does this mean? That means that somebody was viewing pornography and noticed that it was probably a minor and reported it. Now, they probably should have been watching it to begin with, but they had just enough conscience to report something. And they sent those reports to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So all that to say, I feel like I've been talking a while here, is that you don't know. This is how pornography and trafficking is directly connected. And really, like I said, when these children and boys and women don't know that their most horrific night of their life is being filmed and then it's going to be distributed for money, they they endure a trauma that is unlike any other. And if you want to know more about these stories, you can Google the latest lawsuits against Pornhub right now and against Twitter, which is now called X. But there are live lawsuits in place right now of child victims of sexual abuse who have had their abuse filmed and monetized and distributed. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that and let you ask another question, because I feel like I just been talking, but this is such a horrific issue that people really need to know about. And hopefully, if this is you and you're involved in pornography, you understand what we're talking about and you stop and you get help.
No, that was phenomenal. It goes to show that it just, again, everyday people just watching pornography, just thinking this isn't affecting anybody. No one knows this little secret of mine. Here I am in my bedroom alone, and not even realizing the industry that they are feeding into and what is coming as a result of that. And it's like you said, some of them actually have the decency to go, oh, maybe that was a minor in that video. And so maybe it's time for me to report that or say something. But it's for the New York Times to be reporting and diving into that. That's how you know this isn't just what people like to call a right-wing conspiracy theory. This is
Yes.
happening daily. Another thing that stems from porn, and this is again because of the bill we've been working on in California, I've learned that a lot of young girls are now being sexually abused by younger boys because they've watched porn, they've seen the violence in it, and they just think that's how you're supposed to act in this situation, because a lot of it nowadays is very violent pornography. Mm-hmm. So we have that connection between pornography and sexual abuse. And this is something that I think as a society as a whole, we've done a lot better about talking and being open and vocal about sexual abuse than we might have let's say, were 20, 30 years ago. People are now
Yeah.
able to share and people are listening to what's going on. Somewhere we saw that most recently is in the Nickelodeon, the whole series Quiet on Set, that documentary about Nickelodeon and sexual abuse of these minors. Is there a connection there between pornography and what we saw happen to children in Hollywood? If anything, you would think those are the untouchable children, the most protected children.
Yes, like you said, yes, of anything you would think, well, nothing can happen to them. But absolutely, pornography is connected to the abuse that happened on the set. And I know maybe some people may have watched it, the docu-series Quiet on the Set about Nickelodeon child stars of the mid to late 90s to early O's, and maybe came to different conclusions. But I could not help but see a direct parallel between the eyewitness accounts, the court case documentation, and the research we currently have on pornography. They were just like dot to dot to dot in a straight line. What happens in pornography? Humiliation tactics, gagging, sexual penetration by objects, all kind of horrific things. And what happened to one major star in this series, Drake Bell, who was the only one to really come out about his sexual abuse? God bless him. The exact same things you see in pornography. Mm-hmm. So when you read his case file that summarizes some of the things that happened to him, it is as if copy and paste from the most major things of pornography happened to him. And the female co-workers on the set were testifying that Dan Schneider, the producer at the time, would routinely make them say, "I'm a insert gender slur," okay? And he called it workplace fun. But what takes place is really what we see in pornography is name calling of women and making they themselves call themselves names as an act of degradation and humiliation. And really what we see is pornography becoming the sexual script for violence, for aggressive sexual behavior towards women and children, and really how adults behave with children and how males behave with females. And the reason why I point out those two categories is because the main category of pornography is teen. So when Pornhub puts out its major reports on the types of things that people are viewing, what they're searching, and different keywords, teen is the most often searched term for the type of porn that people are viewing. And the majority of those people are still male. There's a growing percentage of women consuming pornography, but it's a different type of pornography, more erotica novels than just straight hardcore pornography. And that's concerning because, again, pointing back to Quiet on the Set, here it is, we have so many children being on a TV set, okay? And the scripts that are written for them, the type of humor that is written for them in these scripts is pornographic humor. And they, as a kid, they felt like something was off. They felt like something was wrong, but they were too scared to say anything, and they were too young and naive to know really what was being portrayed. But the adults knew. Dan Schneider knew, and the other writers in that room knew. And so the question becomes, why did they do this? Where did they get the ideas for this type of adult, okay, it's perverse humor in child entertainment networks? Where did they get it from? And I won't go into all the explicit details because I don't want your stuff to get flagged here, Sophia. So, but you can read an article that I recently wrote from the Federalist that goes into details about the types of humor and the types of things that were done on this set and how this directly correlated to major scenes of pornography. I don't think it's a coincidence, and that this was perpetrated on children of all people. So we really have to be vigilant about what we're consuming and be truthful about the harms that it's doing to our society right now.
You pointed out even the scenes, the adult perverse script writing that would happen that these children would have to act out. And I remember watching Drake and Josh, that show. I watched iCarly. I watched Victorious. And those things, like, it never clicked for me because I was a child. I wasn't, I guess, taken over by the world yet to know what these things meant. And then watching the Quiet on Set documentary, seeing the amount of, like, foot scenes there were, or girls laying on beds pouring water over themselves, or
Yep.
it just, I was like, first of all, I'm grateful that as a child that didn't click in my head that that was a perverse thing. Like, I'm glad I was able to just kind of be pure through that and just watch the show for the funny things. But these children had to act out those scenes, which was really these grown adults watching their porn fetish come to life, truly.
Yes.
And it's also, like you said, you made a good point of this, and I think it correlates to this, is having not even just the children acting in those scenes, but myself and other kids that watched it, those things were then normalized. It wasn't like, this is inappropriate. It was like, oh, there's just a funny foot joke, or haha, that's silly. And so I think, unfortunately, that's a lot what we're seeing happen with porn as well. It's just the normalization of it. You go and watch like 90% of movies on Netflix nowadays, and there's a full-on porn scene, and everyone's just acting like this is fun to watch with your friends. But I think it's just them normalizing into society, and correct me if you think differently, but at the end of the day, it's just all going back to the money industry. It creates money.
It does, and it desensitizes people. So they think if we can desensitize children, okay, we can further enjoy our pornography fetish. And you talked about different foot scenes. Okay, foot fetishes is a major theme in pornography. There's so much to unpack. If you want to go back and look at the docuseries, your listeners, go back in light of what we're saying, and maybe you'll see it with different eyes. But it does go back to the money, because if they can hook you while you're young, that they got a customer for a longer period of time. And that's why you mentioned earlier about a person who started out, who was exposed to pornography at an early age. And we know that the average age is somewhere between 9 and 11, if not sooner, that they're being exposed to pornography. And that's intentional, because they want to hook you early and make you a customer for life. Because if they can do that dopamine trip in your brain to go, "Ooh, that's interesting. Oh, I'm curious. Let me see more," then you will further develop a habit, which will make you a customer. And again, like you said, it goes back to money. And this is how you really know such a sexually perverse agenda is demonic in nature. Like, why would you want to sexually pervert children? Why would you want to sexually pervert families and harm women? I'm glad Drake Bell was able to come out about his testimony and be so transparent, because oftentimes male victims of abuse aren't. And I think now we're in a time where we're more open to hear their stories and believe them. And I think some of that was pioneered from women sharing their stories and in the hashtag Me Too movement. And now we're saying, look, it can't be anybody. It be women, children, kids, men. And the point is, we want to become a culture that not only values the right to life, but the quality of life. And these two issues of abortion and sexual exploitation are symbiotic linked. You cannot break it, because the more sexually perverse a culture becomes, the more appealing abortion is on the table. And we have to start looking at how do we promote and cultivate a society that is sexually safer, more sexually sanctified, so that abortion does become unthinkable. Pornography does become unthinkable. And so there is a lot of apologetics we have to do for not only the right to life, but the quality of life we want for women, for men, and for children.
Absolutely. And that, people might be listening to this podcast and they're probably nauseous, frustrated that this is the society we live in. But unfortunately, we have become a society that worships sex. And again, that leads to the direct correlation to abortion. I mean, if we go back to remembering the fact that sex was created by a good God for a beautiful reason between a man and a woman in marriage, if we can take it back from that, then we recognize that out of sex does come pregnancy. And again, not every single time, and there's ways to watch that and everything like that, but we have just come to sex as something to bring us pleasure. Sex is something we worship. Sex is something that is talked about every day in your everyday life with people. Oh, how many people have you slept with? All these things. So then when you become pregnant, it's just like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen because that's not what sex is for. So let's just go handle that real quickly. Let's just go get rid of that. And I think it's allowed us to have that shift that abortion is a woman's right instead of diving into how harmful abortion is towards women. And that's what, when I try to talk to people about that, it's like, listen, even if you don't believe that that is a human life inside the woman, which it is, but even if you do not believe that, we could dive into just how harmful abortion is for a woman's body. And that's just all, I think, like you've said, it goes back to the fact that we have put sex on this platform, that we have diluted the minds of innocent little children. I mean, I think there's parents right now probably listening and honestly maybe freaking out a little bit hearing the stat that most children view porn for the first time, or not even intentionally all the time, at 9, 10, 11. And so I think with that, people are probably thinking, okay, I've heard this horrible stuff. Is there any light? Is there hope? What is going on? So, Patrina, could you maybe dive into some stuff you've been working on? I know you've testified before against some of this crazy stuff. And so, just so people know that there are people fighting to make this world a better place and to push back against the sex industry.
Yeah, great question. And that's something that we always need. We can constantly curse the darkness, but when do we light a candle to cast a light? And I believe that that personally starts with the individual. Number one, for women in particular, since this is a women focused podcast, is instead of going with the mainstream society where we're just focused on sex, how good it is, and, rating the quality of his, promiscuity with us or whatever, why don't we start focusing on values? Does this person have the same values as I do? And maybe you need to sit and think about, what values do I want to have? What values do I currently have? And build relationships based off of shared values. And then number two, I would say, get yourself involved in a group of people that are going the way that you want to go. Because there is a good old saying that says, birds of a feather flock together. Who are your friends? Who are your inner circle? I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, and I have great community in my Christian church and with friends that align with my values. Not all of my friends do. You can't live in a bubble. But as far as my inner circle, people that I know will help me go in the right direction, I build that circle. I build that community around myself. So start with that too. You can't save the whole world, but you can start with yourself. And then somebody else will look at your life and say, I want to be like that. I want a relationship like she has with so and so. It's healthy, it's productive, they actually love each other. So be an influencer. And I would say number three, we can't leave without saying this. Vote. You have to vote. You have to vote your values, because you have an opportunity to steward your freedom here in this country. Your freedom, your rights, your values. And what's so great about the values of abstinence, the values of marriage, the values of the right to life, the values of punishing abusers and criminals who are sexually exploiting women and children, is that these values are not religious, but they give freedom and prosperity to anyone, whether they're believers and Christians or not. And that's the beauty of truth. Truth gives blessing and prosperity to anyone and to everyone, regardless of whether they're a believer or not. And that's why it's so important to vote, because when you vote, you're not just doing what's right for yourself, you're really doing what's right for your neighbor. You're loving your neighbor as yourself when you vote your values. So, those are the three things I would say you can do. And then also, as a resource, there is a book called Choose Life: How to How to Defend Abortion Arguments with Wisdom and Compassion that I was a part of, and it was put out by Moody Publishers in 2022, and you can still purchase that on Amazon. But it goes through every type of scenario, even the ones that we touched on today, sexual exploitation. And if you kind of just want to sit down and kind of get your thoughts together, so you can figure out how do I articulate this in a conversation without looking like I'm fumbling around or looking like a jerk, it is a really good book to kind of just help you settle your own thoughts so that you're prepared to be loving and kind and winsome in a conversation that you might find yourself in.
I love that, especially the go and get informed, because I think nowadays, just with social media and the culture we live in, everyone wants to all of a sudden just have a voice, put out all this information. But I think the best way to do things in love, in compassion, to know what you're talking about in conversation is spend some time reading that book, getting informed, and not necessarily going and shouting out to everyone what you've learned so far. Just really digest it, really learn it, and then you'll learn how to use it in conversations once you feel prepared on those topics. But with that, is there any final thing, Patrina, that you want to just have the listeners know, whether it was about the quiet onset, Planned Parenthood, anything we talked about, or something we might have missed on this topic?
Yeah, I would say that, we're talking about marriage and the sanctity of sex, is that God's design for marriage only makes sense when you have God a part of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right now we're at a time in culture where we are full of moralism. Okay, what do I mean by that? We have the alpha red pill males. We have the hashtag trad wife, and those things aren't necessarily bad. But when you try to replace God with moralism, you get all kind of weird stuff. Okay, you get weird stuff. You get men who think women are here below them. You get, women who set themselves up to be prey for abusers because they're hashtag trad wife in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is, marriage and manhood and womanhood does not make sense without God. You can say a lot of good things, but when you take God out of the equation, you get a lot of mess, you get a lot of drama. Because when God is in the equation, you have men and husbands who are willing to die for their wives because of the love they have for them, the respect they have for them, because they're following Christ. And then you naturally have women who want to respect their husbands because of the love like Christ that they are getting. And that's the kind of relationship and picture that God in his perfect will wanted the world to see, because he wanted the world to see his relationship with us. And that is exemplified in a marriage relationship. So I bring this up to talk about relationships is so important when we talk about sexual exploitation and abortion, because really those two things come from toxic relationships. Those are results of toxicity in a male-female relationship. And what we want moving forward is not only a right to life, but we want healthy relationships for women to choose life in, with healthy partners who love them like Christ, and they have no um, grudge or bitterness in building a family with this person. So moving forward, pro-lifers and as women who are pro-family as well, let's start the conversation of building healthy relationships, because we don't want further abortions in our community. We don't want further abuse and exploitation in our community. And that really starts with the family and healthy relationships between males and females.
Oh, so good. I mean, I'm going to just listen to that last part on repeat and repeat every morning. That's just such a yes, like that. Again, you don't have to go and fix the whole world. It really starts in the home, with your relationships, in the family, and just building out your community from that, I think is so beautiful. But Patrina, thank you so much for being on. I know everyone's probably loving this. They want to probably learn more, hear more. So where can they read some of your stuff? What's the best way for them to kind of keep up with everything you're doing?
The best way to keep up with me is on X, formerly known as Twitter. Some people call me crazy, but I'm still on there, and that is the only social media platform I am on. You may see me cut up from time to time, but at least you know where I stand. And I'm on there. You can find all of my writings and commentary on that platform.
Amazing. So for all those watching, check out the podcast caption, the YouTube caption. We'll have all the information and all of that there. But thank you so much for being on, Patrina.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.